This is Jed Distler, and welcome to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. You can subscribe to the Piano Maven podcast through my Substack page by clicking on the link in the episode description. Paid subscribers get bonuses such as Piano Maven Zoom meetings, where we share listening experiences, and from time to time we have special guests, and you also will receive some free recorded goodies from my vast collection of piano treasures. So please consider subscribing to help us reach out further into the piano community and to keep this podcast afloat and in production. A few months back, I devoted an episode to discussing the Schumann C Major Fantasy Opus 17, and a listener wrote in to ask me if there were any pianists who had recorded complete cycles of Schumann's piano music. There certainly have been, but I had not really researched exactly how many pianists had recorded complete Schumann cycles. There really haven't been all that many, to be honest. And furthermore, some so-called complete Schumann cycles are more complete than others in terms of including various revised versions of works or including early sketches or unpublished pieces and so on and so forth. But basically, all pianists who have amassed comprehensive Schumann cycles do include all of the works with opus numbers, plus other pieces that have long been a part of the proverbial canon. So I'm going to give you just a very general guide to some of the Schumann cycles past and present without going into great detail. This is just to tell you what's out there and what has been available and what might hold your interest and some rarities that you might want to look out for. At some later point, I might delve into one or two of these cycles in much, much more detail. But for now, here's just a general guide to what has been out there as far as Schumann cycles are concerned. Peter Frankl recorded a Schumann cycle for the Vox label, and it's currently available from Menuetto Classics in download format. You can download lossless files of the whole cycle for around $50, and considering that's the equivalent of 14 CDs, I guess, it's actually quite a bargain. This is a very consistent and stylish Schumann cycle. You're not going to want Peter Frankl to replace your favorite versions in the big pieces, but, nothing falls below a very high standard, and I've enjoyed these performances on and off for many years. The pianist Carl Engel's Schumann cycle was originally recorded for the French Valois label, and they appeared on the Telefunken label during the LP era in these beautiful boxes. Anyway, the whole cycle was issued in Japan on CD, and that edition is almost impossible to find. I happen to have it here, but I don't listen to it a lot. But there is much to admire, especially in the strange introspective works like the Morning Songs. Much of Waltszenen I like. His late Albumblätter I think are very beautiful. His Carnival and C Major Fantasy are not the most ardent and red-blooded around, but the Kinderscenen is beautiful, and the Davidsbündler is really quite characterful. The Davidsbündler Tanz, have to add tons at the end of that. And that's a very volatile kind of piece, and Carl Engel is not the most volatile pianist on the block. But generally, this cycle is more hit than miss, and it's well worth hearing, but I would not break the bank seeking it out. The pianist René Giannoli recorded a Schumann cycle that first appeared on CD on individual discs on the ADES label, ADES. And then it was boxed up on the Accord label. Universal Classics controls the copyrights. But I have to say that this pianist was frankly way past her best when she came to make these recordings. Usually she's under tempo and quite effortful, and you really have to wade through this collection to find the best things. But by and large, it is not a Schumann cycle that I would recommend. But I would recommend the cycle with pianist Jörg Damus. It came out on the Nuova Era label at one time, and I remember it was selling for next to nothing in physical format, and it's floated around in all kinds of incarnations. Sometimes the recording quality is a little bit dry, but not always, and generally Jörg Damus is a very strong and authoritative Schumann player. I like his Chrysleriana a lot, and the C major fantasy is very good. His third sonata, the so-called concerto without orchestra, I think really holds its own against the competition. And if you can find the cycle for not a whole lot of money, I would definitely get it. Don't underestimate Jörg Damus and Schumann. I should mention a complete Schumann cycle on the Thoraphon label with the pianist Franz Vorarlberg. I haven't heard all of it, to be perfectly frank. I've only heard maybe 3 or 4 discs, and that was years ago. But I had mixed impressions about what I did here. He can be kind of aggressive and even insensitive. I'm thinking about the Noveletton, where he just barnstorms his way through some of the pieces. But this kind of approach actually proved pretty exciting in Carnival. I guess it depends on the work. So my jury is still out on this cycle, and I really don't know in which format you can find all of the volumes. But there is one Schumann cycle that I've really grown quite fond of. And I just recently found a secondhand copy of it because I missed it when it came out the first time around. It features the French pianist Donna Cioccarli. Did I say that correctly? Cioccarlie. Dana or Donna. Okay, Dana Cioccarli. And it's on the La Dolce Volta label. And what makes this cycle interesting is that all of the performances were recorded live in concert. And there's a real sense of occasion and more than a few surges of adrenaline resulting from her tendency toward animated tempos. And it is true that she sometimes pushes her really terrific technique to the limits and sometimes forces her sound, but honestly, that doesn't bother me in the heat of the moment because these are vibrant recordings that really hold your attention. But there's a lot of sensitivity. I don't know why I think of Dana Cioccarli as something of a cross between Clara Haskell and Alfred Cortot. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that. But I have gotten a lot of enjoyment from this set. If you can find this set in physical format at a good price, grab it. But you can find downloads, but the downloads are all individual releases, and they seem to be on the expensive side. But this is a Schumann cycle that's definitely ripe for reissue. I also want to mention an interesting, though only partial, Schumann cycle because it's kind of a curiosity, and it's a set that I myself did not know about until only recently when I stumbled upon a review published in a back issue of International Piano Magazine. It features the late pianist and conductor Jean-Pierre Marty, and he was known mainly as a collaborative pianist and as a conductor, not so much as a virtuoso piano soloist. The story behind this set is that Jean-Pierre Marty would spend several weeks each summer at the summer home in Maine owned by Mr. Daythorpe, who was the manager of the Washington Opera, where he would often conduct. Jean-Pierre Marty would conduct, I mean. So Mr. Daythorpe was an amateur recording buff who owned very good recording equipment. So apparently, during the summer of 1969, Marty played through several Schumann sonatas that he had recently learned, and he allowed his friend to record him very informally, just straight playthroughs with no editing. And then Mr. Thorpe said to his friend, "Hey, why don't we record Schumann's complete piano works just for fun?" So that's exactly what happened. Jean-Pierre Marty started working on and playing through all of Schumann's piano works in opus number order, with Mr. Thorpe's tape recorder capturing it all. These were just playthroughs in one take, no editing at all, and these informal sessions spilled over into the next few summers of 1970 and 1971. The project got as far as Opus 32, and it never went any further. But the tapes were rediscovered in 2007, and they all happened to be in surprisingly good condition. So the Solstice label brought out a box set of these recordings. Obviously, the sound is hardly up to today's professional standards, but it is kind of fun to hear this really fine pianist and musician go through Schumann on the fly, so to speak. It's kind of like sitting in on an informal jam session or something like that. So they're interesting recordings. Unfortunately, this release has been way out of print for a long time, and I did finally find a copy at the Academy Record Store on 18th Street in New York City, which is the largest secondhand record store for classical music in New York City. And I saw a copy in the window. I think they were selling it for $30. It's 8 CDs, but I grabbed it because I thought, when am I ever going to see this again? And I've enjoyed it from time to time. I suppose I also should mention the partial Schumann cycles that were recorded for commercial release. There was one with Claudio Arrau and one with Vladimir Ashkenazy, and I think I will save discussion about those for another time. But I do have 2 recent complete Schumann cycles to mention. Florian Uhlig's 17-disc Schumann survey for Hensler Classics stands out because it is as comprehensive as possible, leaving no unpublished piece unaccounted for and leaving no sketch unturned, so to speak. So from a musicological standpoint, it's absolutely invaluable, and the documentation and the annotations could not be better. That said, I kind of find him to be an uneven interpreter. I mean, the playing is always on a very high level, but it isn't consistently inspired to my taste. Sometimes the playing lacks ardency, but as far as documentation is concerned and completeness, this is really quite unique. However, if I have to mention the most consistently satisfying piano playing in a complete Schumann cycle, that has to be from the pianist Eric Lesage. He recorded all of Schumann's piano works on the Alpha label, and it's readily available as a box set. And he also recorded the complete Schumann chamber music with piano, also for Alpha. He's a great technician, he's a sensitive colorist, and he's always alert to inner voices and bass lines and asymmetric phrases without resorting to eccentricity or overdoing it. And I think I reviewed one of these volumes quite a while ago, and I wasn't terribly sold on it, but it's really grown on me since. And again, it's the consistency that has sold me on this box set. But the other thing that distinguishes his Schumann playing is that Eric Lesage really has that knack for hitting on just the right tempos. There isn't a tempo that seems too fast or too slow. You really can agree with all of his tempos, actually. So for the most consistent performances by one pianist in all of Schumann with superb engineering, I definitely would make the cycle on Alpha with Eric Lesage a priority purchase. He's not going to make you forget about or part with your favorite reference versions of certain Schumann works. I mean, you're not going to toss out your Vladimir Horowitz Chrysleriana or your Carnival with Nelson Ferreri or your C major fantasy with Sergio Fiorentino or your Kinderszenen with Ivan Moravec. But as I said, you're not going to find a more consistent Schumann cycle out there than with Eric Lesage. This is Jed Disler, and you've been listening to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to being with you for the next episode. Take good care.